Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Apologies for the slight delay. We had a few technical issues that had to be resolved. So I'm really sorry for the slight delay. But let's get started with today's session by first looking at the key topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen many important articles for your mains and your prelims. We have these three articles that are extremely important for our mains examination. We will cover them as comprehensively as possible. And we have a few prelims articles that are very, very important for the upcoming prelims exam. So let's ensure that this discussion is as detailed as possible so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are liking the initiatives, do support us by pressing the like button. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and do let us know what you think in the comment section below. Before we start, we have a couple of important announcements. We are offering a 50% discount on our IAS courses, and it's a limited time offer. And when you subscribe, you'll not only get a 50% discount, but you'll also get a 6-month free extension on your course subscription. And please note that the English medium online classes, the new batch, is starting from the 16th of March. So if you wish to enroll, you can contact the number that has been provided over here. And also, as part of the free special classes that we conduct on the Unacademy app, starting from today, we are starting a new series related to international relations. Starting from today at 1 p.m., I will be covering the role of the Prime Minister in India's foreign policy. Today will be an introductory class at 1 p.m. on the Unacademy app, and we'll understand the critical role that the Prime Minister of the country plays in India's foreign policy decision-making structure. So under this series, which will continue over the next 2 weeks, we will understand the contribution of various Indian Prime Ministers in shaping India's foreign policy. So do attend these classes live, and the link for the same is provided in the video description below. So without wasting any further time, let's get started with the analysis by looking at this important development that has been reported on page number 1 and 13. Just a couple of days ago, it was reported that Election Commissioner Arun Goyal had offered his resignation to the President of India. The President of India has accepted the resignation of the Election Commissioner, and this comes at a very crucial time because India is all set to head towards general elections for 2024. We are just days away from the Election Commission announcing the election calendar, and just before that, Election Commissioner Arun Goyal, whom you can see here in the image, has offered his resignation. So as a result, the Election Commission of India, which is responsible for conducting elections to key constitutional bodies, is facing 2 vacancies as of now. Because one other election commissioner had recently retired, and now with the other election commissioner also resigning, it is left with just the chief election commissioner. So there are articles in today's newspaper that are speculating about the reasons behind the resignation of the election commissioner. And there are articles which also talk about the vacancies that are going to be filled by a selection committee as per a new law that was enacted by the parliament last year. So let's talk more about the election commission, its role, its composition, and some recent changes that have taken place with regards to the appointment process. So all these points that we are going to discuss can be very important for your prelims and as well as for your mains. If you look at the Indian Constitution, under Part 15, we have Article 324 that provides for elections in India and talks about the Election Commission of India as a constitutional autonomous body to conduct elections in the country. Under this article, the Election Commission of India has been established as a constitutional autonomous body, and it has full superintendence over the conduct of elections to the parliament, to the state legislatures, and as well as to the office of the president and the vice president. If you look at clause 1 of Article 324, it clearly defines the role, the mandate of the Election Commission. It is responsible for conducting elections to the parliament, the legislatures, and as well as to the offices of the president and the vice president. So this body will be headed by a chief election commissioner who is appointed by the president, and there can be other election commissioners as well to assist the chief election commissioner, but this is fixed by the president time to time. The article says that the president of India, essentially the council of ministers headed by the prime minister, because the president is bound by the aid and advice of the council of ministers. So president of India from time to time might fix few other vacancies or few other positions of election commissioners, right, who can assist the chief election commissioner in conducting the elections in India. So Election Commission of India is a multi-member body as of today, but it hasn't always been a multi-member body. There have been instances, periods where the Election Commission has been a single member body headed by just one chief election commissioner. So there have been changes that have been done over a period of years, and that's what we'll be looking at as well in the coming discussion. We'll also talk about the recent changes that have taken place with regard to the appointment of election commissioners and chief election commissioner. We'll also discuss the conditions of service, the process of removal and resignation as well of the election commissioners and chief election commissioner, because that is exactly the topic in news which is being discussed in these articles in today's paper. And also please note that the parliament can bring out a law that defines the appointment process, that defines the conditions of service and tenure of the chief election commissioner and the election commissioners. So parliament has been vested with that authority to bring out a law that provides for the conditions of service, the tenure, and other related aspects with regard to the chief election commissioner and the election commissioners. The article also says that regional commissioners can be appointed at the state level to assist the Election Commission of India in the conduct of these elections. The article also talks about the president providing all the staff, the government staff necessary, and the assistance and resources to the Election Commission that are needed to conduct the elections in a free and fair manner. That is, be it the provision of security services, be it the provision of the government's bureaucracy, which will aid the Election Commission in conducting these elections, which forms the very foundation of the Indian democracy. So all these provisions are contained under Article 324. So in short, the Election Commission of India is a constitutional body and it performs a critical role in the Indian democracy. In any democratic setup, conducting free and fair elections constitutes the very bedrock of that constitutional state. Ensuring that the elections are held in a free and fair manner without any interference, without any manipulation, without any bias is the responsibility and the mandate of this constitutional body. So initially, the Election Commission was a single member body for many years from 1947, that is, let's say 1950, when the constitution was adopted. Since then till 1989, during this period, the Election Commission remained a single member body. India gained independence in 1947, the constitution was drafted and finally adopted in 1950. So with the adoption of the constitution, Election Commission of India was constituted, was established in the year 1950. So since then till 1989, the Election Commission remained a single member body. It was headed by the Chief Election Commissioner. There were no other election commissioners provided by the President. As we just discussed, under Article 324, the President may time to time fix other roles of the election commissioners, can provide for other election commissioners to assist the Chief Election Commissioner. So until 1989, there was no need felt to appoint other election commissioners, and Election Commission of India remained a single member body until 1989. But then a big change was carried out. Two election commissioners were provided in 1989 to assist the Chief Election Commissioner. This was to ensure that one single individual will not misuse this powerful institution to derail the process of elections. Because if there is only a Chief Election Commissioner, right, given the authority, given the power that a Chief Election Commissioner exercises, if the Election Commission is a single member body, there are chances that this tremendous authority and power could be misused. It may not be judicially employed, or this might affect the conduct of free and fair elections if the chief election commissioner himself or herself is biased towards certain leaders or certain parties. So given these considerations and given the developments of that period of 1989, two election commissioners were appointed, thus expanding the composition of the Election Commission of India. But this was only for a short duration. It was only for a 1 year time period. This came to an end in 1990. After this, Election Commission reverted back to being a single member body. After this, the president revoked the offices of the election commissioners, and only the chief election commissioner continued to head the election commission, thus making it a single member body again. But in 1993, following the T.N. Session era, T.N. Session was this legendary chief election commissioner. Following the controversies associated with T.N. Session's era, Election Commission was again reverted back to a multi-member body by providing for the appointment of two election commissioners. Thus, it again became a three-member body. So, to begin with, in 1950, Election Commission of India was a single-member body. In 1989, two election commissioners were provided until 1990. Then it had returned back to being a single-member body headed by the chief election commissioner. And then again in 1993, the election commission reverted to being a multi-member body. Two election commissioners were provided to aid and assist the chief election commissioner. So since then, it has remained a multi-member body till now, and the decisions are taken by consensus or majority. If there is a tie between them, the final say of the chief election commissioner is what prevails. And this three-member body has been conducting the elections in the country, not just for the parliament, but also the state legislatures, and also to the office of the president and the vice president of India. Now, in this regard, there are two important Supreme Court rulings that you should be aware of. Back in 1990, when two election commissioners were provided for the first time, when for the first time Election Commission was made a multi-member body, there was a case at the Supreme Court related to the composition of the Election Commission. And under the SS Dhanova versus Union of India, the Supreme Court had observed that it is better to have two heads to such a key institution than it being headed by just one individual. The Supreme Court agreed and supported the argument that Election Commission should be a multi-member body, meaning there should be at least three election commissioners, with one of them being the chief election commissioner, so that all the three can judiciously employ their logic, their decisions to ensure the free and fair conduct of elections in the country. The Election Commission, right, was too important a body to be vested with just one individual. The Supreme Court, in the SS Dhanova judgment, it opined that Election Commission cannot be left to just the chief election commissioner, one single individual, because this is an extremely powerful and extremely significant body, and just one individual, whether they may or may not be able to act in the right interest, right? This is up to their individual judgment, and that is too big a risk to take in a democracy, because the Election Commission's integrity is what holds the country's democracy together. So given this significance of the Election Commission, the Supreme Court had opined that it's better to have a multi-member body than having a single member body. But however, 4 years later, after Election Commission was again made into a multi-member body in 1993, in the T.N. Session versus Government of India, in this particular case, where T.N. Session had approached the Supreme Court challenging the appointment of two election commissioners, the Supreme Court diluted its own judgment that was previously delivered in the SS Dhanova case. In the T.N. Session judgment, the Supreme Court said that whether the Election Commission will be a single member body or a multi-member body, this is left to the President of India. This is left to the discretion of the President, because that is what Article 324 says. We saw that Article 324 vests this authority with the President to fix from time to time any other additional election commissioners that are needed to assist the Chief Election Commissioner. So the Supreme Court went for a literal interpretation of Article 324, and in a way it diluted and overruled its earlier judgment delivered in the SS Danova case. In the SS Danova judgment in 1990, the Supreme Court had said that such a key body cannot be a single member body. It has to be a multi-member body. But now the Supreme Court was saying in the T.N. Session case that whether it will be single member or multi-member body will be decided by the president, because this constitutional power is vested with the president under Article 324. But since then, Election Commission has remained a multi-member body. But every now and then, the appointment of the election commissioners, their functioning, their neutrality has come under question. Because until recently, these election commissioners were chosen and appointed essentially by the government itself. Because the appointment power of the president is not a discretionary power. The president is bound by the aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. So Ministry of Law and Justice would come out with a shortlisted panel of election commissioners who are eligible for the post. And finally, the Prime Minister with the Council of Ministers would decide as to who would be the Chief Election Commissioner and the election commissioners. And those names would be forwarded to the President for appointment. So this is the process of appointment that we had until recently. But last year, the Supreme Court carried out a major judicial intervention. In March 2023, exactly a year ago, the Supreme Court said that since government itself has full control over the appointment process, this compromises the independence of the Election Commission of India. What is the guarantee that the election commissioners appointed by the government itself can be trusted with regard to their neutrality and integrity? What if they are seen to be returning favors to the ruling party, to the leaders who appointed them? So by highlighting this concern, the Supreme Court provided for a selection committee to appoint the election commissioners and chief election commissioner. The judiciary gave itself a role in this appointment process, because under the directions that were issued to the powers of the Supreme Court under Article 142, which is an extraordinary power, the Supreme Court said that there shall be a selection committee headed by the Prime Minister of India, which also includes the leader of the opposition and the Chief Justice himself. A 3-member selection committee was established by the Supreme Court to ensure that a free and fair process is followed, an unbiased, neutral process is followed in the appointment of election commissioners to this critical constitutional body. So this obviously was not acceptable to the government. So there was a role given for the leader of the opposition. If there's no leader of opposition, the leader of the single largest party in the Lok Sabha, right? The Prime Minister would chair this selection committee, but the concern was about the judiciary giving itself a role in the appointment process. This was seen as a case of judicial overreach, as a case of judiciary overstepping its jurisdiction and entering into the domain of the executive and the legislature. So this was countered by the government within a few months by bringing out a bill which was passed in the parliament, and the CEC and Election Commissioners Act 2023 was passed by the parliament last year. This act brought out by the parliament has overturned the Supreme Court's judgment. It has provided for a new selection committee which removes the role for the judiciary in the appointment process. It excludes the Chief Justice of India. So this selection committee right now includes the Prime Minister, the leader of opposition or the leader of the single largest party in the Lok Sabha, and a union minister, cabinet minister appointed by the Prime Minister. So the government has given itself more authority within the selection committee when it comes to appointing the election commissioners and chief election commissioner. It has fully removed the role of the Chief Justice or the judiciary in the selection and appointment process. So this is the current appointment process that is provided for as per this act that was passed with the parliament last year. Understood? So there are articles in today's newspaper that very soon the selection committee is going to meet. The committee headed by the PM, a union cabinet minister appointed by the PM, and leader of opposition or the leader of the single largest party in the Lok Sabha. This committee will meet very soon to select the 2 election commissioners to fill the vacancies that are left behind by the retirement and the resignation of the previous election commissioners. So that is the important development reported over here, and it's important to be aware of all these details. Now, how about the resignation process, the removal process? What are the provisions provided for this? The election commissioners can resign at any time by submitting the resignation to the president, because obviously president is the appointing authority, right? All these executive actions are taken in the name of the president of India. So be it the chief election commissioner of India or the election commissioners, they can resign at their own will by submitting their letter of resignation to the president. Once accepted by the president, the resignation stands good. That is exactly what Arun Goyal did a couple of days ago. He submitted his resignation to the president, and it has been accepted and notified as well by the Ministry of Law and Justice. So right now there are 2 vacancies to be filled, that too in a crucial period, because within a few days the election calendar for 2024 general elections is going to be announced. So election commission can't be just a single member body during such a crucial period. It has also raised a lot of controversies as well as to what were the reasons behind the resignation of the election commissioner, whether the ruling party will misuse the powers it has to appoint election commissioners to ensure election commission acts in favor of the ruling party. So all these questions have been raised by the opposition, by the media, but the government says that this is a fair and just appointment process which has been provided by the law passed with the parliament last year. Now coming to the removal, if you look at the removal process, chief election commissioner can be removed only by following the same process as that of a judge of a Supreme Court. In fact, if you look at the conditions of service and the tenure provided to the election commissioners and chief election commissioner, they have a tenure of 6 years or till they reach the age of 65 years. Right? This is the tenure which is provided to them. Of course, they have the right to resign on their own, but if they have to be removed, if the chief election commissioner has to be removed, right, then the government can't simply remove the chief election commissioner, or the president can't simply remove the chief election commissioner. A process similar to the removal of the judge of the Supreme Court, which is often referred to as a so-called impeachment process, right? Even though Constitution of India doesn't refer to it as impeachment, the process followed in the removal of a judge of a Supreme Court should be followed on the same grounds, on the grounds of proven incapacity, if he or she is of unsound mind, only on these proven grounds, right? And through the process through which a judge of a Supreme Court is removed through a parliamentary process, the same process has to be followed to remove the chief election commissioner. So in that regard, the chief election commissioner enjoys a higher degree of immunity, whereas election commissioners can be removed more easily. If chief election commissioner recommends the removal of election commissioners and recommends this to the president can go ahead and remove those election commissioners. So election commissioners don't enjoy the same degree of immunity and protection with regard to their tenure, but chief election commissioner has a higher degree of protection. Their emolument, their other privileges offered to them is on par with judges of Supreme Court. But when it comes to removal process, it's only the chief election commissioner who has the same treatment provided as far as the protection of this position is concerned. So this ensures that the chief election commissioner in particular can function in a neutral manner without any fear or without any threats or concerns, without being subdued by any pressure from political elements or by the government. This in a way ensures the independence of the authority as well. But many critics point out that the appointment process, especially the one provided right now, is highly flawed, as the government itself has a higher control over the appointment process. If you look at the appointment committee, right, which selects the candidates and refers the names to the president for appointment, the government itself has majority. The prime minister and the union cabinet minister, they can outvote the leader of opposition, right? So that's why it's argued that the government itself has given control over the appointment process, just like before, right? So if you look at the search committee, which selects the panel, the shortlist, the panel of eligible candidates, according to the law that was passed by the parliament, this search committee is headed by the cabinet secretary, along with other top officials. It includes the union home secretary. It also includes the secretary of DOPT, the Department of Personnel and Training. This search committee is headed by the cabinet secretary, according to the law. But however, the article today, which talks about the filling of the 2 vacancies, refers to a different search committee headed by the law minister. Now, this is a little curious and interesting. It is based on what the government has reported. The government has said that within a few days, the 2 vacancies will be filled. The selection committee headed by the PM will meet, and finally they'll recommend the names as well to the president. But the shortlisting process by the search committee, right, which has to shortlist the candidates, it will be done by a search committee headed by the law minister, according to the news reports, which is based on government reports. So this appears to be in contradiction to what the law says. The law says the search committee will be headed by the cabinet secretary. But here, the government has said the search committee will be headed by the law minister, along with the Union Home Secretary and Secretary to the DOPT. So you can expect that in the next couple of weeks, the two vacancies will be filled very soon, and very soon the election calendar will also be announced. So it's very important to be familiar with the constitutional position of the Election Commission, its role, its mandate, its composition, the appointment process, the removal process, the conditions of service. All these are very, very important points for your prelims and as well as for your mains. Now let's look at another important development reported on page number 1 and 12. India and EFTA countries have signed a landmark free trade agreement. I'm just going to give you the overview of this topic because this topic will be discussed in detail today by Sarmad Sir in a separate session under Economy Explained. By evening, we will release another video, a special video on this topic, where Sarmad Sir will discuss the entire aspect of this important development. Here, I'll just give you the overview, the importance of this development. Later, you can watch this session on our YouTube channel to get a full understanding of this important development between India and EFTA countries. Now, this is a topic which we have been discussing over the last few weeks. It's been reported over the last few weeks that India is very close to finalizing this free trade agreement with a group called EFTA, the European Free Trade Association. This group consists of 4 major European economies that includes Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. See, these 4 countries, they are not part of the European Union, Customs Union, and the trade market. The European region has a common market and a customs union under the EU, under the European Union. But there are 4 countries which are not part of the trade zone, the free trade zone and the customs union of EU, which is Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. These 4 European countries have formed a separate free trade area under EFTA, European Free Trade Association. So it is distinct from European Union. The EFTA is a distinct trade and customs union compared to the European Union. So India has been negotiating a trade agreement with both of them. We are negotiating. India's ongoing trade talks with EU has hit a dead end. It has hit a major hurdle and it has not seen any progress over the years. But however, we have achieved a major progress with EFTA countries and we have finalized the agreement and signed the trade agreement as well. So this trade agreement is called the TEPA, Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. It's a full-fledged trade agreement that India has signed. In fact, this is the second full-fledged trade agreement that we have signed in the last 2-3 years, after the one we signed with United Arab Emirates. A couple of years ago, we signed a full-fledged FTA with UAE. After that, this is the first full-fledged FTA that we are signing with EFTA countries. So this trade agreement is very, very crucial because these countries are major markets for Indian exports. India has a lot of exports headed towards these countries, be it our agricultural exports, industrial exports. There are a lot of exports headed from India towards these countries and they represent a significant market for India's farmers, MSME industry, etc. At the same time, India is also a very, very important market and an investment destination for these countries. Many companies from Norway, Iceland, Switzerland, and even Liechtenstein have operations in India. They have major investments in India. They look at India as a key market. So it's only natural for India and EFTA countries to come together. Of course, they were rushing to finalize this trade agreement before the elections because if elections are held and once the new government is in place, the whole process will get delayed again by several months. So there was an urgency from both the sides to finalize the trade agreement as soon as possible and to sign the trade agreement before the announcement of the elections. That is why both the sides have concluded the trade pact and the TEPA has been signed, the Trade and Economic Partnership Agreement. So let's look at the key features of the trade agreement. Through this agreement, EFTA countries are promising $100 billion in investments in India over the next 15 years. Over the period of next 15 years, these four countries are promising to bring $100 billion worth of investments into India, which is very, very significant. As per the trade deal, $50 billion will be invested over the next 10 years, over the next 1 decade, and another $50 billion over the period of next 5 years. That is from 10 to 15 years. So essentially, in the next 15 years, we are likely to expect $100 billion worth of investments from these four countries. Is that clear? Now, this trade agreement will become operational maybe by the end of the year because it is still pending ratification. They've only signed the trade agreement. So the ratification will also be required, especially those four countries, Norway, then Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. They will have to ratify the trade agreement. They will discuss this within their legislatures, their parliaments as well. India is likely to do the same. And once ratified, by the end of this year, maybe by end of 2024, the trade deal is going to become operational. So since then, that is from end of 2024 till the next 15 years, we are going to get $100 billion total investment, with 50 billion coming in the next 10 years and another 50 coming in the next tranche of 5 years. This is expected to create 1 million jobs in India. It is expected to create 1 million jobs in India over the next 15 years. And in return, India will provide many advantages to these countries. We will provide increased market access by reducing our tariffs. India is going to reduce its import duties and custom duties. India is going to simplify the custom procedures so that the companies, the exporters from these countries can easily access the Indian market and increase their exports towards India. So this is supposed to be mutually beneficial, benefiting both the sides. India has said that these terms are binding in nature. But EFTA countries don't agree with it entirely. They are saying that the investment promised, it is of course a outline which has been projected, but it's not that the governments are investing. It's not that government of Switzerland or government of Norway are investing in India. It's their private companies which will invest in India, and of course governments have no control over that. But they are confident that their companies are going to invest this sum in India because they look at India as a massive market, as a big lucrative market. And if they fail to bring the investment as promised, India has an option. India can withdraw some of the trade relaxations after giving a grace period of 3 additional years and another 2 years for negotiation. So in total, after 20 years, India can revoke some of the trade concessions provided. We can increase some of the tariffs. We can bring back some of the barriers to trade to protect Indian markets from these countries. That is the option India has been provided with the agreement. That is, if the countries fail to bring $100 billion as investments and if they fail to create 1 million jobs, after this grace period, which will end in the period of 20 years, then India can bring back some of the barriers to trade and reduce the concessions given so that we can penalize these countries for failing to match the commitment. So India believes that this is legally binding. The other countries don't agree with that. They think that private companies are the ones which are going to invest in India. Of course, they realize that India has the option of bringing back the trade restrictions, but they don't see this as a binding commitment. But they are 100% confident, based on the trade relationship and the size of the Indian market, that their private companies are going to invest this amount in India, because that is how big the Indian market is for these countries. That is why this is a very, very big development, because on the other hand, we have not been able to strike a trade deal with the European Union. So achieving a free trade agreement with EFTA is indeed a big achievement for both the sides, and this could be beneficial for both the sides. So this is what you need to know. And there is an article as well which says that India finally agreed and finalized the trade deal based on the promise of $100 billion worth of investments. That is what really attracted India to this trade agreement. So The other countries are also looking at the benefits they are going to gain by accessing the Indian market, just by looking at the size of the Indian market. So once this trade deal becomes operational, your Swiss chocolates, watches, and many other goods from these countries will become cheaper in India, as they will enjoy almost duty-free access into the Indian market. Similarly, Indian farmers, Indian MSME industry will benefit by increasing their exports to these countries. Even India's software industry and many other key industries, especially labor-intensive industries like jewelry, leather, furniture, they will benefit, which will create more jobs, and this could also bring more investment from these countries into the Indian market. Of course, we had some issues as well over intellectual property rights, especially related to generic drugs. It was reported earlier that these countries, especially Switzerland, they were insisting on data exclusivity principle under the IP laws. They wanted to prevent Indian generic drug manufacturers from getting access to the clinical trial data of patented drugs which are developed by these countries, the companies located in these countries. Essentially, they were trying to block Indian generic drug companies from producing the patented version of these drugs. So they had raised a demand with India to agree for data exclusivity. That is, clinical trial data of patented drugs will be exclusive to the company which developed the therapy or the treatment, and it will not be accessible for Indian generic companies. But India rejected this outright, as it's crucial for India to produce generic medicines, not only for our own healthcare sector, but even for the healthcare sector of many other countries, as they depend on India's generic drug manufacturers. So India rejected the data exclusivity principle, but we have agreed to some of their IP constraints that they were insisting upon. India has agreed for strict implementation of IP laws to protect intellectual property. And that is how this trade deal was achieved. And it has been finalized and signed between India and these countries. So do watch this session tonight on our YouTube channel, where you'll get a much deeper understanding of this important topic. I've just given you the overview, the importance. So later you can watch the session for a much deeper understanding of this important free trade agreement. Now let's look at this important editorial on page number 8 and a related article on page number 9. These articles deal with the water crisis which is being reported in Bengaluru and Karnataka. This has not only hit national headlines, it has become global headlines, because the IT capital of India is facing a severe water crisis. In fact, we have even carried out a detailed discussion of this topic on our YouTube channel, where Mukesh Sir has discussed the water crisis in Bengaluru under a separate video. You can go back and watch that as well. So we have this editorial and article that's talking about the water problem in Bengaluru and Karnataka, and this is something that applies for the rest of India as well. Because the current problems that you're seeing in Bengaluru and Karnataka is not just exclusive to Bengaluru and Karnataka. This is something that is likely to happen in other parts of India, maybe in other parts of the world as well. The severe water crisis that we are staring at, right? This is more of a environmental issue, and it's a result of the mismanagement of our water resources. That is exactly what the article is talking about. If you look at the editorial in today's newspaper, it's pointing out that there is a lot of attention on the water crisis in Bengaluru. Why? Because Bengaluru is a big city, the IT capital, etc. But there is not much attention being paid by the media with regard to the water crisis being faced by Karnataka itself, especially northern Karnataka, which belongs to a semi-arid region. There has been deficit rainfall over the last 1 year due to the prevailing La Nina conditions. There has been deficit monsoon rainfall, and especially the retreating monsoon has largely failed over the last few months of 2023. This reduced rainfall in the catchment areas of Kaveri River Basin, the Tungabhadra River Basin, is what is causing a massive water shortage in thousands of villages in Karnataka. If you look at northern and northeastern Karnataka, there are hundreds and hundreds of villages staring at absolute water shortage, right? Of course, cities, industrial centers are also facing the same crisis. And this is not just about shortage of rainfall. It's not just a one-time phenomena related to the La Nina season. The problem goes much beyond that. The problem is related to large-scale unplanned urbanization. The problem is related to over-exploitation of the groundwater table. the lack of focus on recharging our groundwater table, the lack of focus on efficient water management and water conservation practices. In fact, a few years ago, there was a report by the Niti Aayog which stated that in the coming years, most cities in India will stare at similar crisis situations. Be it Hyderabad, Mumbai, Delhi, all major cities, even tier 2, tier 3 cities, are likely to stare at a similar crisis due to the misuse of water resources and the poor management, poor utilization of the water resources that we have. The destruction of the natural wetlands, the lakes. For example, if you look at Bengaluru, right? Bengaluru was known as the city of lakes. At one point, it had 1,000 lakes, not just in the city, but in the surrounding areas as well. If you look at Bengaluru's water divide, right? You have the highest point in the CBD, in the Central Business District, around MG Road and the high ground area, which is in central Bengaluru. This forms the highest point, and the valleys branch out on both the sides of Bengaluru. Historically, the city had been planned in such a sustainable manner that cascading lakes were created with water canals or Rajakaluways around the city to channel the water flow and collect the water so that it could meet the drinking water needs of the entire city. So, in all the valleys, be it the Arkavati River Valley, which is one of the tributaries of the Kaveri River, the Vrishbhavati Valley, the Hebbal Nagavara Lake Valley, Kormangla Chalagatta Valley, right? These are major water drainage areas which are part of the larger drainage basin of Bengaluru. So historically, the city had been planned in such a way that from the highest point, right, that is from the center of the city, the water would drain out into these valleys present around the city, where cascading lakes would collect the water and any excess flow would be diverted into the Rajakaluways or the canals that were created, which connected the different lakes in the city and around the city. This had made Bengaluru self-sufficient for many, many decades. But now the problem is aggravated because these lakes, these Rajakaluways have been destroyed due to unplanned, unscientific urbanization, the overpopulation, the sudden increase in the economy and the developmental activities, the encroachment of the lake bed and wetlands and the drainage basin by the real estate mafia. Apartments, malls, and infrastructure has come up on these Rajkaluways and the lake beds, thus destroying the drainage basin and the system, which obviously results in shortage of water during the dry periods, right? Plus, the concretization of the city has not left any space for percolation of the rainwater, and this has exhausted the groundwater table. Thousands of apartments around the city with excessive water consumption, water wastage, has completely exhausted the underground water table, with now governments and private companies and residential areas trying to dig deeper and deeper to extract water from the depths of the groundwater table. So essentially, Bengaluru is staring at a Cape Town-like situation. A couple of years ago in Cape Town in South Africa, there was a devastating water crisis of unimaginable scale. Right? Emergency measures had to be brought in Cape Town to deal with the situation for several months, as there was an absolute critical shortage of water. Now, this is going to be the fate of many cities, not just in India, but around the world. Given that climate change is a reality, given that abnormal rainfall patterns are going to become a reality, right? We are likely to witness more and more such periods where there could be critical water shortage, while we might face floods in other parts of the country and the world. So that is why these articles are calling upon India's urban planners to focus on rainwater harvesting, to focus on water conservation, to focus on groundwater recharge. These are sustainable methods through which water demand can be satisfied. Right? The Hindu is also talking about protecting the lakes and the canals in our cities. So this is a lesson, not just for Bengaluru, not just for Karnataka, but the whole country, and even for other urban areas around the world. These erratic rainfall patterns are likely to increase because of climate change, but we can't simply put the entire blame on climate change and sit aside. We have to plan better. We have to bring out more sustainable water management practices which has been practiced historically. In fact, if you look at the history of urban development in Bengaluru, centuries ago, when the city was built, it was designed to be self-sufficient. The whole idea was to ensure that Bengaluru does not need water from faraway resources, such as the Kaveri River. Kaveri River is a few hundred kilometers, at least 120, 130 kilometers away, flowing in the Mysore-Mandya belt. But today's Bengaluru is dependent heavily on the Kaveri water, drawing water from a faraway region. So if the Kaveri River dries out, if the Kaveri basin dries out, then Bengaluru water shortage gets exacerbated. That is the concern. That is the problem, right? The city was designed to be self-sufficient because the urban planners of that era had ensured that they had leveraged the unique topography of Bengaluru. They had ensured that cascading lakes and the canals would store enough water which would help the city to overcome even the summer season. But now that is no longer the case because the lakes, the canals have been destroyed, encroached. Groundwater table has been overexploited. Heavy concretization of the city has not allowed for any percolation to happen. Right? So this is pure urban mismanagement. Right? And this is something that will affect every other city in the country as well in the coming years. So there are major lessons that we need to draw from here. That is exactly what the editorial and this article is talking about. It's highlighting the need for rainwater harvesting in our cities. So this is not just the responsibility of the government and the local bodies. This is the responsibility of the civil society, the citizens as well. Ensuring that every building, every house has a rainwater harvesting facility. Ensuring that we create enough space for water percolation into the groundwater table. Ensuring that we protect and conserve the lakes, the wetlands, right, the canals. So these are important practices which will help us manage the water demand in a sustainable manner. It will reduce our dependency on faraway water sources, and instead it will help every town, every city to become self-sufficient. Right? It's all about better urban planning, better resource management. And that is the key takeaway from this editorial and this article that we have on page number 8 and 9. So this completes my detailed discussion of all the big articles. Now let's head towards the prelim section and we'll look at a few important prelims articles. On page number 4, we have this article referring to the Kuno National Park in Madhya Pradesh. According to the article, cheetah cubs have been born at the Kuno National Park. So you should know where the Kuno National Park is located. You should also know about Project Cheetah, which is a conservation reintroduction program of the cheetah species into India. And you should also know about the unique features of the Kuno National Park. Right? All these facts could be very important for your prelims. India's cheetah population had been driven to extinction due to large-scale hunting and taming of the cheetahs during the colonial period. Right? The native cheetah population had been driven to extinction. So recently, the Modi government has launched an ambitious reintroduction program, the Cheetah Reintroduction Program under Project Cheetah. So from Namibia and South Africa, we have translocated cheetahs into the Indian subcontinent with an attempt to reintroduce the cheetah population in the wild. So few habitats were selected as the ideal habitats for the reintroduction program, and one of them is the Kuno Palpur protected area in Madhya Pradesh. The Kuno National Park is a critical habitat, and the dry deciduous forest present over here and the grasslands present over here is a perfect, ideal, suitable environment for the cheetah population. Apart from this, 2 other sites were also chosen, including the Chagar protected area in Rajasthan and the Naura Dehi protected area in Madhya Pradesh. So the initial batch of cheetahs that were procured from Namibia and later from South Africa, they were introduced here at Kuno National Park, but unfortunately, some of the initial individuals did not survive. Due to the harsh conditions, due to the challenges faced in this protected area, some of the cheetahs lost their lives due to infection, due to shortage of prey, right? And due to diseases. Many cheetahs lost their lives, and experts were criticizing the program as a failure. But over the last few months, there has been good news for India because several fresh litters have been born, including the 5 new cubs that were born at Kuno National Park. So the population has now jumped to a decent population of around 26 individuals in the wild, and this also points towards the success of the cheetah reintroduction program under Project Cheetah. So these are some basic details you should be aware of. Next, on page number 10, the Hindu carries a detailed article of the new toll collection system that is being introduced by the Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. The Minister, Nitin Gadkari, has announced that India will be moving away from toll booths to completely automated toll collection system. If you've taken a drive on any national highway or any expressway in India, I'm sure you would have encountered these notorious toll booths. The highways are of great quality. You cruise at a very good speed. You cover your distance in a shorter span of time. But you end up spending a lot of time at the toll booth itself due to the bottleneck that gets created. Right? Especially before, when people had to pay the toll in cash, there would be a lot of time wasted, especially by the slow moving trucks, the larger vehicles, sometimes even by car owners. Right? So this was a huge waste of time, leading to major bottlenecks, especially on the outskirts of cities. Plus, this was leading to wastage of fuel. It was making our road transportation inefficient. So to make this better, India introduced the FASTag, a RFID sensor, which is put on your windshield as a sticker, right? And you preload the money into the wallet, and you just pass through the toll booth. Automatically, the scanners will pick up and deduct the amount. So this has been a fairly decent solution, but again, it has not solved the problem. Even now, toll booths have to be present where the cars come to a stop. Many times, people may not have recharged their wallet, or many cars, even though it's mandatory, they will not have the FASTag RFID cards, right? So it's due to some of the other problem. The toll collection system is still seen as inefficient. If you compare this with other countries, like let's say, for example, some European countries, United States, or even Taiwan, they all have automated expressways where you have an onboard unit linked to the satellite navigation system, and automatically the tolls are collected through this accurate satellite based navigation system. You don't have to stop or pass through any toll booth or ensure that you get a scan done without wasting any time, without any bottlenecks. Vehicles can move uninterrupted, but the tolls will be deducted and collected very efficiently. So India is also planning to introduce this new toll collection system. We are likely to move towards an onboard unit, which will be mandatory in all the new vehicles. And this will be linked with the global positioning system, most likely with India's regional navigation system and the Gagan satellite constellation. So through Indian satellites, through the Gagan constellation, and also through India's regional navigation satellite system, right? These onboard units in your cars, trucks, vehicles will be connected, and it will be very accurate. It will pick up the positional information very accurately. And as you cover these distances on different highways and expressways, automatically the toll amount will be deducted. So in the future, we might look at a situation where toll booths may not be necessary. However, for the time being, the FASTag system will continue. But down the line, if this implementation takes over completely, you might see a point where FASTag will also not be required. But until then, both will operate parallelly. FASTag will continue to operate along with the new toll collection system, which is being introduced on a pilot basis. Very soon, it will be rolled out across the country, and it will be made mandatory for all the new vehicles. So that is something you should be aware of with regard to road transportation. Next, on the same page, we have an article related to competition issues associated with some of the big tech companies like Google and Apple. Recently, I discussed this topic, I think 4 or 5 days ago, when Google had delisted some Indian apps from the Play Store. It triggered a major issue, and it required the intervention of the government of India to ensure that Google lists these Indian apps back on the Play Store, right? So then we had discussed one very unique case in the European jurisdiction where Spotify, the popular music streaming app, had sued Apple for anti-competitive policies, where Apple was seen to be exploiting its monopolistic position and dominant position to create a disadvantage for smaller companies like Spotify. In this landmark case, the European Commission has ruled in favor of Spotify, and it has penalized Apple. It has imposed a hefty penalty of 1.8 billion euros because the practices of Apple went against the European standards established under the Digital Markets Act. Now, this could be very important for your prelims. UPSC might ask you, which jurisdiction has implemented the Digital Markets Act, or what does it deal with? There can be a standard prelims question. So European Union has enacted the Digital Markets Act to regulate the gatekeepers of the digital world. Who are the gatekeepers in the digital world? Anyone who's providing search engines, web browsers, for example, the dominant search engines, the dominant web browsers, the app stores, the dominant messaging services. These are our gateways to the internet. Correct? For example, we all rely on Google Play Store, Apple App Store to download various applications. We all rely on search engines like Google, Bing, etc. Right? We all rely on web browsers like Google Chrome or Apple Safari and the others. Right? Similarly, some top messages or messaging services. These are the gateways for the internet. They are the gatekeepers. Now, the problem here is that these companies which have these various applications which control access to the internet, right, they are at an advantageous position. If they misuse their dominant position, the monopoly that they have here in the market, they can easily create a disadvantage for the consumer and as well as for their competitors. Now, for example, if you look at Google Android phones, as we discussed the other day, Google has this deal with mobile manufacturers where some of Google's applications come pre-installed and you can't delete them. On your Android phone, try deleting the basic Google applications which are pre-loaded, pre-installed in your phone. You can't delete them. The delete option is not available. Same with Apple. On the Mac OS, try to delete the preloaded Apple applications. You can't delete them, right? They make it inbuilt. And this is a way to, channel the customers towards their own products, their own services, their own applications. So this is an automatic disadvantage for the competitors, for smaller companies and startups. When it comes to billing in-app purchases, these gatekeepers levy heavy taxes, right? They levy a commission. For example, let's say there are applications like Spotify or Shadi.com, right? So whenever people subscribe to something on the app or make a payment on these particular apps, these companies are mandated to route all payments through their own payment gateways of Apple and Google. Plus, they take a cut as well. The commission is anywhere in the range of 15 to 30%. In the European market especially, these companies are expected to pay a 30% transaction fee for Apple and Google, right? This is seen as anti-competitive because other competitors can never survive. Like Apple will push its own products like Apple Music, Apple TV, etc., thus cutting down competition for other competitors like Spotify, Netflix, or the others. So this is seen as unfair trading practices. It is seen as an unfair market environment created by the so-called gatekeepers of the digital world. So to impose regulations on them and impose obligations on them, European Union brought out the Digital Markets Act. It's a very important piece of law, something that India can also learn from. Right? In India as well, we are facing similar challenges regarding competition laws, antitrust issues with these big tech companies. So European market has created a precedent by bringing out the Digital Markets Act. It's under this provision that Apple has been penalized for abusing its dominant position and for misusing the App Store to create a disadvantage for Spotify, which is a competitor to Apple Music. So the European Commission has ruled in favor of Spotify and levied this hefty penalty on Apple under the Digital Markets Act. So there can be a basic question on the Digital Markets Act. You should know which jurisdiction is it applied in. It is applied in European Union. And what does it deal with? It basically regulates the gatekeepers of the digital world. The regulations will apply for these big tech companies which are developing operating systems, which own these popular search engines, app stores, messaging services, etc. Right? So there is a list of do's and don'ts imposed on them. And if they violate the act, they will be penalized by the European Commission. Next, on page 12, we have a reference to the National Commission for Scheduled Castes, the NCSC, which is a constitutional body to look after the welfare, the development of the scheduled caste community in the country. The National Commission for Scheduled Castes has been reconstituted according to this article. The government has appointed the chairperson and some of the members of the National Commission for Scheduled Castes. So understanding what is this commission, what is its constitutional status, what is its role, is very important for your prelims with regard to polity, governance and social justice. See, under the Indian Constitution, we have Article 338 that initially provided for a special officer to look after the welfare of the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in India. This special officer was supposed to inquire into the conditions of the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe communities, inquire their social, educational, economic backwardness, and submit reports to the parliament and the president. Later, through a particular amendment, there was a constitutional amendment that was done. I'll not tell you which amendment it was. I'll give this as an exercise. Find out which amendment was this. Through a certain amendment to the constitution, the special officer was replaced by the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes. A constitutional body was established, an authority was formed, a national commission to look after the welfare, to monitor the status of both scheduled castes and scheduled tribes in the country. Then later, one more amendment was done. Another constitutional amendment was carried out to split the two bodies into the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and a separate National Commission for Scheduled Tribes. I want you guys to find out which are these two constitutional amendments. Through which amendment the National Commission for Scheduled Castes and Scheduled Tribes was set up, and through which amendment it was split into two separate national commissions for scheduled tribes and scheduled castes. Please find this out and mention those amendments in the comment section below. So the primary role of the National Commission, right, the chairperson is appointed by the president. Of course, the government selects the chairperson, the members, and president makes the appointment. So this commission is responsible for monitoring the status of scheduled castes, to check whether there are any violation of their fundamental rights and legally guaranteed rights. If any of these rights are violated, right, where scheduled castes are discriminated, oppressed, or targeted, these incidents will be inquired into by the National Commission. It will also conduct the required surveys to identify their social, educational, and economic backwardness. It submits recommendations to the government to look after the welfare of the scheduled caste community. Right, so this is the primary task of the National Commission, and it is a constitutional body constituted under Article 338. So please find out through which amendments these changes were done. Through which amendment the special officer was replaced with the National Commission for SCs and STs, and through which amendment this constitutional body was split into two separate national commissions for SCs and STs. Please mention that in the comments. Now coming to another important article on page 14, there is a key concept you can understand from here. Zero food children. This article is referring to a category of malnourished children called zero food children. This is according to a report published by a few organizations. This report is pointing out that India has a very high burden of malnutrition in India amongst children and infants. According to the report, India has the third highest percentage of zero food children in the world. Now, what do you mean by zero food children? This could be asked in prelims. This is a globally recognized parameter to measure child malnutrition, especially amongst infants. Let me explain what is zero food children. It refers to those infants, especially in the age group of 6 months to 23 months. If these infants have not consumed any substantial food in the last 24 hours, then they are called zero food children. If you take their calorific intake over the last 24 hours, be it the solid food, the semi-solid food, or even the breast milk which is fed to them, or even the formula milk which is given to them, right? Be it whatever food which is fed to them, if you take everything into account, and if they haven't received adequate calories, right? If they haven't received any such calorific intake, either through milk, formula milk, or through solid or semi-solid food, basically if they've gone hungry for 24 hours, such children are referred to as zero food children. Now, this is a high risk category because this will make them prone to the conditions associated with malnutrition, severe malnutrition. These are children who might suffer from stunting and wasting, where their physical growth is affected. It could affect their mental growth, their mental well-being as well, right? So this is seen as a very important indicator of hunger and malnutrition in the country. So zero food children are those infants who haven't received any substantial calorific intake or any substantial food in the last one day, in the last 24 hours. And according to this report, India has the third highest percentage of zero food children in the world. Especially states like Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra, Bihar, they are the worst performing when it comes to zero food children. So let's look at the last article for today. On page 14, we have an article referring to the golden langur. A golden langur census has been conducted in the Manas Biosphere Reserve in Assam. So what is the golden langur? How many of them are found? Where are they found? What is its conservation status? These are the important facts that is important for your prelims. You can see the golden langur here in this image. It belongs to the primate species, right? It's a distinct species within the primate world, and it is a threatened species. It is listed as endangered on the IUCN Red List. It is offered the highest degree of protection under the CITES Convention by placing it under Appendix 1 of the CITES Convention. Species listed under Appendix 1 of CITES, right? Their international trade is completely prohibited. It is offered the highest protection under the Wildlife Protection Act of India. It is listed as a Schedule 1 species in India as well. Now, this monkey species or primate species, the golden langur, it is endemic to a very small part of India and Bhutan, and it is specific to this region. It is found only in some parts of Assam, in the Manas Biosphere Reserve and in the region around it, and it's also found in parts of southern Bhutan. This is where you find the golden langur. So according to the latest census that was done in Assam by various environmental organizations and government organizations, the population of golden langurs in India is at around 7,396. All right. So that is the population. It's an increase from the last census that was done in 2008-2009. So the population of golden langur has increased by a small margin, which points to the healthy growth of its population. But please note that it's highly endemic. It is endangered. It is specific to the Manas Biosphere Reserve and parts around the Manas Biosphere Reserve in Assam, and it's also found in southern parts of Bhutan. That is what we take away from this article. And on this note, I would like to conclude the discussion for today. So please take up the mains answer writing questions. You can copy them down, use them for your answer writing practice. It's all based on what we have studied and discussed throughout the class today. So I expect you to write an answer to this and, if possible, post the answers in the comment section below. So on this note, let's conclude the session for today. I hope you guys have liked it. I hope you guys have understood everything. If you did like the session, do let us know through your likes, through your comments, and without fail, subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a great day.